poor single mom returned $50,000 she found. The billionaire saw it all and followed her home. Hello everyone, and welcome back. Before we begin, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Leave a comment below and tell me your city and state, or your country if you're joining us from somewhere else. Today's story follows Danielle Carter, a hardworking single mother who has barely enough money to make it through the week. Then, on a rainy evening, she finds a bag filled with $50,000, enough to pay her overdue rent, buy her daughter new shoes, and make many of her worries disappear. But Danielle makes a choice that no one expects. What begins as one simple act of honesty soon reaches Marcus Bennett, a powerful CEO who discovers that the company he built may be helping create the very hardship Danielle is struggling to survive. This is a story about integrity when no one is watching, kindness without expecting a reward, and the courage to fix something bigger than one person's problem. Now let's begin. Ma'am, you dropped this. Danielle Carter's voice nearly vanished beneath the rain hammering the grocery store awning. But the older man 20 feet ahead stopped and turned just as she lifted the brown leather bag he had left beside a shopping cart. For half a second, Danielle considered simply waiting for him to come back. Maya was beside her, 7 years old and tired after a long day, hugging her faded purple backpack against her chest while cold rain blew beneath the awning. The bus would arrive in 12 minutes. Danielle still had groceries to buy, and every minute mattered when you didn't own a car. But the man was already crossing the parking lot toward a black SUV, unaware that anything was missing. Come on, baby. Danielle took Maya's hand and hurried after him. The leather bag was heavier than it looked. Near the far end of the lot, she opened it just enough to search for a name, and her steps stopped. Inside was a gray canvas envelope, partly unzipped. Stacks of $100 bills filled it from edge to edge. Danielle stared for one stunned second. $50,000. Maybe more. Her fingers tightened around the handle. That morning, she had counted $26. 18 in her checking account. Rent was behind. The electric bill sat unopened beneath a cereal box at home. Maya needed new sneakers because her toes were pressing against the front of the pair she wore now. Danielle could think of 100 things that money could fix before the rain reached the next painted line in the parking lot. Maya looked inside the bag, then up at her mother. Mom. Danielle closed it immediately. It isn't ours. She started running. Across the lot, inside another black SUV, Marcus Bennett looked up from his phone when he heard her calling. He had been waiting for Walter Price, an old business associate who was supposed to meet him before dinner. Marcus watched the woman in the soaked denim jacket hurry through the rain, with a little girl struggling to keep pace beside her. Walter finally turned. His face changed when Danielle held out the bag. You left this by the carts. Walter grabbed it, checked inside, and went pale. Oh my God. He looked at Danielle as if seeing her for the first time. Do you know what's in here? Enough that you should probably keep it closer, she said, catching her breath. Walter reached for his wallet. Danielle shook her head before he could open it. No, sir. Just don't lose it again. Then she took Maya's hand and walked back toward the store. Marcus remained still behind the windshield. He had spent 20 years around people who negotiated over every dollar and called greed ambition when the number became large enough. Yet a woman wearing sneakers with worn heels had just returned enough cash to change several months of her life and asked for nothing. 10 minutes later, Marcus saw her again through the grocery store windows. Danielle stood at checkout, moving items from the belt back into her cart as the total climbed. Bread stayed. Eggs stayed. Maya's cereal stayed. A gallon of milk stayed. Danielle looked at the small bottle of coffee creamer in her hand, hesitated, then set it aside. Marcus felt an unfamiliar impulse to walk inside and pay for everything. He didn't. Something about doing that from a distance felt less like kindness than intrusion. Danielle paid, thanked the cashier, and came outside carrying 2 grocery bags while Maya held the umbrella. The rain had softened to a cold drizzle. As they passed Marcus's SUV, a folded sheet slipped from the side pocket of Danielle's canvas tote and landed near the curb. Neither noticed. Marcus stepped out, picked it up, and called after her, but a city bus was already pulling to the stop. Danielle and Maya climbed aboard before his voice reached them. He glanced down only to find her name, hoping for an address where he could return it. Then he saw the bold words across the top. Final notice. Termination of tenancy. Marcus's expression changed. Beneath Danielle Carter's name was an address he recognized instantly. He should have. His company owned the building. At the bottom of the page, beneath a balance so small compared with the money Danielle had returned minutes earlier, was the logo Marcus had spent 15 years building. Bennett Urban Properties. The bus pulled away through the rain, carrying Danielle and Maya toward home. Marcus stood beneath the parking lot lights with the notice growing damp between his fingers, staring at his own name printed beneath the threat of taking hers away. By 6:15 the next morning, Danielle Carter had already made 3 decisions Maya would never know about. She used the last 2 eggs for her daughter's breakfast and told Maya she had eaten while packing lunch. She moved the electric bill beneath a stack of grocery coupons so the red lettering would not catch Maya's eye. And when Maya asked whether they could make pancakes on Saturday, Danielle smiled toward the little glass jar beside the kitchen window and said, "That is what the pancake fund is for." 3 quarters rested at the bottom. Danielle added a dime from her coat pocket anyway. Their apartment was small enough that the radiator clicking awake in the living room could be heard from Maya's bedroom. Morning light slipped through the blinds in thin gray lines, touching the second-hand table, the sewing machine near the window, and a neat stack of clothes waiting for repair. Danielle had learned to sew from her grandmother in Georgia, first crooked buttons, then hems, zippers, sleeves, and eventually almost anything people brought her. A neighbor downstairs paid her $12 the night before to repair 2 work shirts. That money had become bread, eggs, milk, and Maya's cereal. Nothing stayed money for long. Hold still. Danielle knelt in front of Maya and pressed a thumb against the toe of her sneaker. Too tight. She had known it for a week. "They are fine," Maya said quickly. Danielle looked up. Her daughter had inherited the same habit of pretending not to need things. "You are 7. You do not get to worry about the budget." "I was not." "Good." Danielle tied the laces loosely. "Because that job is already taken." Maya smiled, and Danielle kissed her forehead before reaching for the purple backpack. One strap had begun separating at the seam. Danielle studied it for a second, then placed it beside the sewing machine. Tonight, after walking Maya the 4 blocks to school, Danielle caught the number 22 bus toward Mercy Lakes Medical Center, where she worked the morning shift in the employee cafeteria. By 8, the kitchen smelled of coffee, toast, and industrial cleaner. Danielle moved quickly between the register and serving counter, remembering which nurse wanted extra cream and which respiratory therapist always forgot his wallet on Thursdays. At 10:30, she had exactly 12 minutes for a break. She spent 7 of them repairing the hem of Miss Evelyn's uniform. Evelyn Brooks, 62, worked environmental services on the 3rd floor and had been trying to hold the loose fabric together with safety pins. "You should charge me," Evelyn said as Danielle guided dark blue thread through the cloth. "You gave Maya that winter coat. That was last year. Still counts." Evelyn watched her finish the stitch. "You ever think about doing this for real?" Danielle smiled without looking up. "I do this for real. You know what I mean. Your own place." Danielle cut the thread with small silver scissors. For a moment, her eyes drifted toward the cafeteria window, where morning sunlight reflected from the buildings across the street. "A little shop," she admitted. "Repairs, alterations. Maybe one front window big enough for a sewing table." It was more than she usually said aloud. Dreams felt safer when nobody could hear them. Her phone vibrated inside her apron. The school number appeared on the screen, and Danielle's hand stopped. Maya was fine. The nurse only needed an updated emergency contact form. Danielle thanked her, ended the call, and stood there for a moment longer than necessary. Emergency contact. The blank line on those forms always seemed louder than the others. At 4:20, Danielle returned home with Maya beside her, talking excitedly about a science project involving bean plants. Danielle listened while unlocking their mailbox. Grocery flyers. A utility notice. Then a white envelope with Bennett Urban Properties printed in the corner. Her smile disappeared before Maya could see it. "Can I water the pancake jar plant when we get upstairs?" Maya asked. "The pancake jar is not a plant." "It could be." Danielle tucked the envelope beneath the other mail. "Go wash your hands first, inventor." Upstairs, Maya spread homework across the table while Danielle stood at the kitchen counter and opened the letter. 7 days. The words below it blurred for a moment, then sharpened again. Danielle read every line twice. She could cover part of the balance after Friday's paycheck, Perhaps more if Mrs. Holloway brought the church choir dresses she had mentioned. But not all of it. Behind her, Maya laughed at something in her workbook. Danielle folded the notice carefully and slid it beneath the cereal box with the others. Then she took Maya's backpack to the sewing machine, threaded the needle with blue thread, and began repairing the torn strap. Her hands knew what to do with broken seams. That was the comforting thing about fabric. You could see exactly where it had failed. You could bring the edges together. You could make them hold again. On the table beside her, hidden beneath a box of cereal, 7 days were already counting down. The gray canvas envelope came back into Danielle Carter's life on Thursday afternoon, empty this time, with one loose blue thread curling from the corner like something unfinished. She was wiping the cafeteria counter after the lunch rush when Evelyn leaned through the service opening and nodded toward a man waiting near the entrance. "Someone is asking for you." Danielle looked up and recognized Walter Price immediately. Without the rain and confusion of the grocery store parking lot, he seemed older than she remembered, perhaps in his late 60s, dressed in a navy overcoat and holding the same brown leather bag against his side. Danielle set down the towel. "Mr. Price?" "Walter, please." He approached with an embarrassed smile. "I owe you a proper thank you." Danielle glanced toward the clock. Her break was still 20 minutes away. "You already thanked me. Apparently, I did a poor job." He reached into his coat and removed a white envelope. Danielle did not touch it. "What is that?" $5,000. Her expression changed. Walter lifted one hand quickly. "Before you say no, hear me out. What you returned was $50,000. It was payroll money for a renovation project. Losing it would have created a mess for people who had nothing to do with my carelessness." Danielle stared at the envelope between them. $5,000 would cover what she owed on the apartment. It would buy Maya new shoes. It might even leave enough to repair the old sewing machine before the motor finally gave out. For one dangerous second, relief arrived so vividly that she could almost feel it. Then she pictured herself explaining the money to Maya. "I cannot take that." Walter blinked. "Why not?" "Because returning your bag was not work I performed for you. It saved me a great deal of trouble. Then remember to zip it next time." Walter laughed softly, but Danielle did not. She pushed the envelope gently back toward him. "I appreciate what you were trying to do. I really do. But I do not want Maya growing up thinking honesty is something you do because there might be a reward afterward." Walter studied her face, and whatever argument he had prepared seemed to disappear. "Your daughter was with you that night?" "Yes." "Then I suppose she already learned something." Danielle glanced at the clock again. "I hope so." Walter placed the money back inside his coat, then reached into the leather bag once more. "Could I at least give her this?" He held out the gray canvas envelope that had contained the cash. It was clean now, flattened neatly, the blue stitching along one edge slightly frayed. Danielle smiled despite herself. Maya had talked about that blue thread on the bus ride home, insisting the envelope looked like something her mother could fix. "It is empty?" "Completely." Danielle took it. "That I can accept." That evening, Maya sat cross-legged on the living room rug while Danielle worked at the sewing machine. The repaired purple backpack rested beside her, its strap reinforced with the same shade of blue thread Danielle now used to close the loose seam on the canvas envelope. "So that is the money bag?" Maya asked. "Former money bag. Did he give you any money?" Danielle's foot slowed on the pedal. Children had a way of walking straight into the questions adults spent hours avoiding. "He offered." Maya looked up from her science worksheet. "A lot." "Enough." "And you said no?" Danielle stopped sewing and turned toward her. "Do you think I should have taken it?" Maya considered this with the seriousness of someone deciding whether beans needed sunlight for homework. "I do not know." Danielle nodded. "Me neither." The answer surprised Maya. Danielle smiled faintly. "Doing the right thing does not mean you never wish it had been easier." She trimmed the blue thread and handed the envelope to her daughter. "There. Better than new." Maya ran her fingers over the repaired corner. "What are we going to put in it?" Danielle looked toward the kitchen. The cereal box sat on top of several folded notices she had not yet found the courage to explain. For a moment, she imagined putting Maya's drawings inside, or money for the sewing shop she still hoped to open someday. Instead, she crossed the room, lifted the cereal box, and gathered the papers underneath. The electric bill went in first, then the rent balance, then the 7-day notice from Bennett Urban Properties. Maya was watching from the rug. "Important papers?" "Very." Danielle slid the zipper closed. The envelope that had held $50,000 two nights earlier now contained every reason she might lose the place where her daughter slept. Across the city, Marcus Bennett sat alone at the end of a polished conference table while rain traced thin lines down the windows behind him. Danielle's lost notice lay beside his phone. He had spent the previous day telling himself he would simply return it and move on. Then he had opened the property file attached to her address. He stared at the figures on the screen, then at the signature approving the operating targets for that building. His own. Marcus reached for his coat. For the first time, he was no longer wondering why Danielle Carter had returned $50,000. He was wondering what kind of system made a woman like her afraid of losing her home over a fraction of it. Marcus Bennett had intended to spend 10 minutes at the building. He stayed because the first thing he heard when he stepped through the front entrance was Danielle Carter saying, "Someone is going to get hurt on those stairs." She stood near the management office in her dark work pants and faded denim jacket, one hand holding the gray canvas envelope against her side, while the other pointed toward the stairwell. A ceiling light above the landing flickered weakly. Near the bottom step, moisture had darkened the concrete where water had worked its way in from somewhere behind the wall. Evan Cole, the regional operations manager, stood across from her with a tablet tucked beneath his arm. "The maintenance request is already in the system, Miss Carter. It has been in the system for 3 weeks. We have several properties and limited crews." Danielle looked toward the stairs. "Mrs. Green uses those steps every morning with a cane. There are children running down them before school. I am not asking you to repaint the lobby." Marcus stopped just inside the door. He had come prepared to return the notice, settle Danielle's balance quietly, and leave before his afternoon meetings. It had seemed efficient in the elevator ride down from his office. A problem existed. He had the means to remove it. That was how he had approached problems for most of his adult life. But Danielle was standing 10 feet away from the office that could decide whether she kept her apartment, and she was arguing about a light bulb and a wet staircase. Evan noticed Marcus first. His posture changed immediately. "Mr. Bennett." Danielle turned. Recognition did not come at once. Then her eyes moved to the silver Bennett Urban Properties logo mounted behind the management desk and back to Marcus's face. Something in her expression closed. "You own this place." Marcus held up the folded notice. "You dropped this Tuesday night." Danielle stared at it. "You were at the grocery store. I was waiting for Walter Price." Her gaze sharpened. "So you saw the bag?" "I did." Marcus stepped forward and offered the notice. Danielle took it without thanking him. He understood why. "I reviewed your account," he said. "Why?" The question landed more firmly than he expected. "Because this was in my hand, and my company's name was on it." "That does not make my account your business." Evan shifted uncomfortably. "Miss Carter, Mr. Bennett is the chief executive officer." Danielle looked at him. "I know who he is now." Marcus almost answered with the explanation he had rehearsed in the car. He could clear the balance. He could stop the notice. He could make one call and remove the fear from her face, if fear was what he was seeing. But she had already turned back toward the stairwell. "Can someone fix that before tonight?" she asked Evan. "I will check with maintenance." "You said that Monday." Marcus followed her gaze to the flickering light. The building smelled faintly of damp plaster and old radiator heat. His father would have noticed that smell immediately. Samuel Bennett had spent 19 years repairing apartment buildings before he ever owned one. When Marcus was 9, he used to sit on an upside-down paint bucket while his father replaced faucets and patched drywall after long shifts. His mother kept rent money in a yellow kitchen envelope and counted it twice on the first Sunday of every month. Marcus had hated that envelope. He had hated how quietly his parents spoke when there was not enough inside it. Years later, when Bennett Urban Properties grew from 6 buildings to 60, then far beyond that, Marcus stopped visiting properties unless there was an acquisition, a major renovation, or a problem important enough to reach the executive floor. Reports became buildings. Percentages became tenants. Green numbers meant healthy operations. He had believed distance was the reward for building something successful. Now Danielle was looking at him as though distance was exactly the problem. "How long has the water been there?" Marcus asked. Evan hesitated. "I would need to check the maintenance log." 3 weeks, Danielle said. "Maybe longer." The light started after that. Marcus nodded, then looked at Evan. "Get someone here today." Evan lowered his voice. "We are already over the monthly maintenance allocation." Marcus felt the old response rise automatically. Budgets existed for a reason. Managers needed discipline. Exceptions multiplied. Then Danielle crouched beside the bottom stair and touched the damp concrete with 2 fingers. Tell the budget to explain itself to a 7-year-old when she slips here. She stood, wiped her fingers on a tissue, and picked up the grocery bag at her feet. Marcus noticed a loaf of bread, a carton of eggs, and blue thread tucked into the side pocket beside the gray envelope. Ordinary things. Necessary things. Miss Carter, he said. She stopped. I can take care of the balance on your account. Danielle turned slowly. The hallway seemed quieter around them. You mean pay it? Yes. Why? Because I can. Her eyes held his for a long second. That is not the same as having a reason. Marcus had no answer ready for that. Danielle adjusted the grocery bag against her hip. Fix the light, Mr. Bennett. Then she walked toward the stairs. Marcus watched her climb past the damp landing, one hand brushing the railing as the flickering bulb threw uneven shadows across the wall. Behind him, Evan began explaining maintenance budgets, vacancy targets, and operating margins. Marcus listened differently now, not because the numbers had stopped matching, but because for the first time in years, he could see who had been standing underneath them. The light was working by 6 that evening, but Marcus Bennett barely noticed when Evan Cole sent the photograph to prove it. He was still in his office, jacket folded over the back of a chair, staring at a spreadsheet that had looked ordinary to him less than 24 hours earlier. Occupancy, maintenance cost, delinquency, revenue per unit. Each number sat neatly inside its column, clean enough to make consequences disappear. Marcus scrolled to Danielle Carter's building and opened the operating history. Maintenance spending had fallen for 3 consecutive quarters. Resident fees had risen. Delinquencies had followed. The building was performing above target. That sentence had appeared in a report Marcus approved 2 months earlier. He opened the attached policy file and found the restructuring plan beneath it. Reduce discretionary maintenance. Standardize late fees. Increase renewal rates toward market level. Improve tenant turnover efficiency. At the bottom was his electronic signature. Marcus leaned back. He remembered signing it. Barely. It had been one document among dozens reviewed before a quarterly meeting. The projections had been strong. The assumptions had been presented as responsible. He had asked what the policy would do to operating margins. He could not remember asking what it would do to families. The next morning, he returned to the property without an executive team or scheduled inspection. The repaired stairwell light cast a steady yellow glow across the landing. The damp patch remained. Near the second floor, Marcus heard the soft mechanical rhythm of a sewing machine behind a half-open apartment door. Danielle sat near the window, guiding a pair of work pants beneath the needle while Maya colored at the kitchen table. The gray canvas envelope rested beside the machine, its loose corner repaired with blue thread. Danielle noticed him and stopped sewing. The light works, she said. I saw. The water is still there. I saw that too. Marcus remained outside the doorway. May I ask you something? Danielle waited. The fees on your account. When did they start increasing? Her expression changed slightly. Why? Because I am trying to understand what happened here. You have the records. I have numbers. Danielle looked at him for a moment, then reached for the gray envelope. She unzipped it and removed several folded papers. Then maybe you need something numbers leave out. She handed him the first notice. A service fee, then another. A late charge added after an automatic payment failed when her work hours were reduced. Another fee attached to that balance. Marcus read each page without interrupting. I paid the rent, Danielle said. Then Maya needed antibiotics, and I was short 1 month. I caught up on most of it, but every time I got close, something else was added. She placed one final paper on top. I asked for a payment arrangement. Marcus read the response. Request denied under standardized collection policy. He knew those words. His legal team had approved them. Who denied this? He asked. Does it matter? Yes. It came from your company. Marcus looked up. Danielle's voice was calm, which somehow made the answer harder to hear. You keep looking for the person who did this, Mr. Bennett. Maybe there is not one person. At the management office downstairs, Evan was waiting with the property file open on his tablet. Marcus placed Danielle's notices on the desk. Why was her payment arrangement denied? Evan read the name and nodded. Because the account did not qualify under the revised policy. Who revised it? Evan looked at him, then turned the tablet around. Corporate did. Marcus scanned the page. I want the approval chain. Evan tapped twice and opened the authorization record. There were 3 departmental signatures: finance, operations, legal. Beneath them, alone on the final line, was Marcus Bennett. Evan did not look pleased or triumphant. He looked tired. "You approved the targets," he said quietly. "We were told to improve the numbers. This is how the model gets there." Marcus stared at his own name. For a moment, he saw his mother's yellow rent envelope on their old kitchen table, her thumb smoothing worn bills into careful stacks while his father sat nearby in a maintenance uniform that smelled faintly of paint and metal. Marcus had spent half his life believing money could protect him from ever returning to that room. Somewhere along the way, he had built a company that put other mothers at that same table. "How many residents are under this policy?" Marcus asked. Evan hesitated. "At this property? All properties." The silence answered before the number did. Marcus closed the file. Upstairs, the sewing machine started again, its steady rhythm traveling faintly through the old building. He thought of the gray envelope Danielle had repaired instead of throwing away. $50,000 had once fit inside it. Now it held bills, warnings, and a notice bearing his company's name. Marcus had come here believing he could solve Danielle Carter's problem with one payment. Standing beneath his own signature, he finally understood that Danielle was not the problem he needed to solve. Marcus did not sleep much that night. By 8 the next morning, the conference room on the 42nd floor held only 4 people: Marcus, Evan Cole, the head of finance, and the attorney responsible for resident policy. No assistants. No presentation deck. Marcus placed Danielle's copied notices in the center of the table and said, "Effective today, freeze every termination tied to this fee structure until we review the accounts." Evan's jaw tightened. "Across the portfolio?" "Across the portfolio." The finance director leaned forward. "Marcus, we have refinancing discussions next month. Delinquency performance is part of the package." Then we explain why the numbers changed. Evan shook his head. "That sounds simple from this floor." Marcus looked at him. "I am beginning to understand that." The room went quiet. Evan opened his tablet. "The policy is not illegal. Residents received notice. The fees are disclosed in their leases. Payment plans were restricted because too many accounts remained open for months. We were losing money. I know why we approved it." "Then you know why reversing it overnight creates another problem." Marcus looked at Danielle's final notice. Evan was not wrong, and that made the conversation harder. Marcus had spent years rewarding managers for protecting margins. He could not suddenly pretend they had invented those priorities without him. "Freeze the notices," he repeated. "Do not erase balances yet. Review them." By noon, Danielle received an email saying her housing action had been temporarily suspended. She read it twice during her break at the hospital cafeteria, then called the management office. "What does temporarily mean?" she asked Evan. "It means no action will be taken while your account is reviewed." "Mine." There was a pause. "Several accounts." Danielle looked through the service window at doctors and nurses moving through the lunch line. "Because Mr. Bennett told you to?" "Yes." She thanked him and ended the call, but relief did not arrive the way she expected. That evening, Marcus returned to the building. The wet patch near the stairs had finally been marked for repair, and a maintenance worker was examining the wall. Danielle was sitting at a small table in the lobby, measuring the sleeve of Mrs. Green's church coat while Maya did homework beside her. "Can we talk?" Marcus asked. Danielle finished pinning the cuff before standing. "About what?" "Your balance." Her face cooled. Marcus took a folded check from his coat. "I can clear it personally. No company funds. No conditions." Danielle looked at the check but did not reach for it. "How much?" "Enough to bring your account current." "I know what my balance is. I am asking how much you wrote." Marcus told her. Mrs. Green quietly gathered her coat and moved toward the mailboxes, giving them privacy. Danielle stared at the paper. The amount represented months of breathing room. She thought of Maya's shoes, the electric bill, the 7-day notice now resting inside the gray envelope upstairs. "And what happens to apartment 3B?" she asked. Marcus frowned. "What?" "Mrs. Green. She got a fee notice last month." Danielle pointed toward the hallway. "The Harris family on 4 has one too. What happens to them?" "Their accounts are being reviewed." "But you are not writing them checks." Marcus lowered his hand. "Danielle, I am trying to help you." "I know." Her voice softened, but she still did not take the check. "That is why this is difficult." Maya looked up from her homework, sensing the change in the room. Danielle glanced at her daughter and then back at Marcus. If I take this, tomorrow I wake up safe. Maya stays in her school. I can sleep without wondering whether somebody is going to slide another notice under my door. That is what I want. And everyone else. Marcus exhaled slowly. I cannot personally pay every resident's balance. Exactly. The word was quiet. Danielle folded the check once and placed it back in his hand. Then paying mine is not fixing what happened. Marcus looked at the paper between his fingers. A week earlier, he would have considered the offer generous. Now it felt small. What would you have me do? He asked. Danielle's expression changed. For the first time since meeting him, she seemed less guarded than surprised. You are asking me? Marcus nodded. Danielle looked toward the maintenance worker near the stairs, then at Mrs. Green opening her mailbox. Start by listening before you decide what people need. Marcus put the check away. He stayed in the lobby for the next hour. He listened to Mrs. Green explain why she had stopped reporting repairs because she was afraid complaints would make her look difficult. He listened to a father from the fourth floor describe working overtime after fees turned one late payment into 3 months of catching up. He listened to Evan explain why maintenance crews had been reduced after the operating targets changed. Marcus offered no promises. Danielle noticed that. When Maya became sleepy, Danielle packed her homework and stood. Marcus was still sitting in the same hard lobby chair, his expensive coat folded beside him. You are not going to fix everything tonight, she said. Marcus looked around the aging lobby. I know. Danielle held his gaze for a moment. Good. She took Maya's hand and walked upstairs. Marcus remained where he was, surrounded by problems his money could solve one at a time, and a system his money had helped create. For the first time, he understood that using power was easy. The harder thing was learning when not to use it first. The offer arrived on Monday in a cream-colored folder that looked too expensive for the kitchen table Danielle had bought secondhand for $40. Evan Cole sat across from her while Maya was at school, his coat folded neatly over the back of the chair and a cup of coffee cooling untouched beside him. He had called first. Danielle had almost refused the meeting, but Evan said he wanted to show her an option before the company review moved forward. 2 bedrooms, he said, turning a photograph toward her. The apartment was bright, with hardwood floors, clean white walls, and a window overlooking a small courtyard. It is in our Lakeview property. Better school district. Controlled rent for 3 years. Your current balance would be cleared. Danielle stared at the second bedroom. It was small, but it had a window. Maya had never had a room of her own. For 7 years, Danielle had learned to sleep lightly because every cough, every bad dream, every restless movement came from only a few feet away. What is the catch? She asked. Evan did not pretend there was none. He slid the agreement across the table. You accept the transfer, we resolve your account, and you acknowledge that your individual dispute with Bennett Urban Properties has been settled. Danielle read the page slowly. And the review? Continues. For everyone. Evan hesitated just long enough. The company is evaluating the policy. Danielle looked back at the photograph. A bedroom. A safer building. No overdue balance. A place where Maya could invite a friend over without Danielle worrying about the damp stairwell or flickering lights. Evan leaned back. Miss Carter, I know you think I am the person standing between residents and fairness. I am not. I manage properties. If expenses rise faster than rent, buildings fail. If collection rules change for every hardship, eventually there is no rule. Danielle folded her hands. You really believe that? I do. That made him harder to dismiss. He was not smiling at her pain. He believed systems survived because exceptions did not control them. Danielle looked at the agreement again. How long do I have? Until tomorrow afternoon. After Evan left, Danielle kept the folder closed until Maya came home. That evening, she made spaghetti, checked spelling homework, and listened to Maya explain why her bean plant was growing faster than everyone else's. The folder remained near the sewing machine. At 8:30, Marcus called. Danielle nearly let it ring. Evan made you an offer, he said when she answered. Did you tell him to? No. Do you want me to turn it down? There was a pause. I want you to do what is right for you and Maya. Danielle leaned against the kitchen counter. That sounds convenient. Maybe, but I have spent enough time deciding what people need before asking them. She looked toward Maya, who was sitting on the rug with the gray canvas envelope and 2 dolls. If I take it, does that make everything harder for everyone else? It might change how your case is involved in the review. Marcus did not soften the truth. But Danielle, You do not owe anyone a sacrifice. Not the residents. Not me. Not the company. She closed her eyes briefly. She had expected him to persuade her. Somehow, his refusal made the choice heavier. Good night, Marcus. It was the first time she had used his first name. Neither of them mentioned it. Later, Danielle sat alone at the table with a pen in her hand. She signed the first page where Evan had marked the line, then stopped before the final acknowledgement. In the next room, Maya was supposed to be getting ready for bed. Instead, she had folded the gray envelope into a little tent around one of her dolls. Look, Mom, she has a house. Danielle smiled tiredly. A very expensive house, apparently. Maya giggled. Then she placed the second doll outside the envelope. This one is Mrs. Green. Danielle's pen went still. Why is she outside? There is only room for one. Maya adjusted the doll and looked up. If we move to the new apartment, will Mrs. Green move too? The room became very quiet. Danielle looked at the signed page beneath her hand. She could give Maya a bedroom. She could remove the fear that had followed them from paycheck to paycheck. Was that not what a mother was supposed to do? Protect her child when a door finally opened? She thought about the grocery store, the weight of Walter's bag in her hand, and the moment when keeping what was not hers would have solved almost everything. That choice had been simple because the money belonged to someone else. This was harder. This offer was legal, generous even, and it belonged to her if she accepted it. I do not know where Mrs. Green will go, Danielle said. Maya looked down at the doll outside the envelope. Danielle stared at the final signature line for a long time. Then she folded the agreement closed. The next afternoon, Evan found the folder waiting at the management office. The first page still carried Danielle's signature. The final page did not. On top was a short note in her handwriting. I cannot teach my daughter that home means closing the door behind us while everyone else is still outside. Upstairs, Danielle threaded blue cotton through the needle of her sewing machine and pressed her foot gently against the pedal. She was still behind on rent. She still had no promise that the review would change anything. For the first time in days, however, the choice in front of her belonged entirely to her, and she had made it. The gray canvas envelope looked almost too small on the polished walnut table. Danielle placed it in front of her and took the seat Marcus had left open, while 12 people around the conference room quietly studied the woman who had arrived in a navy blouse, black slacks, and shoes she had polished at her kitchen table before sunrise. 42 floors below, Chicago moved beneath a pale morning sky. Up here, everything was glass, steel, filtered air, and silence. Danielle had expected to feel small. Instead, she thought about Maya eating cereal at Mrs. Green's apartment before school and remembered exactly why she had come. Marcus sat across from her, not beside her. Evan Cole was 3 seats down with the financial projections open in front of him. At the far end, the board chair closed a folder. Mr. Bennett has explained the policy review, she said. Miss Carter, you asked to speak before we vote on the redevelopment agreement. Danielle nodded. Yes, ma'am. She unzipped the envelope. No prepared speech came out. Only paper. She placed the first maintenance request on the table, then another. The broken hallway light. The moisture near the stairs. Mrs. Green's unanswered request about her bathroom ceiling. Then came fee notices, payment records, and the letter denying Danielle's request for an arrangement. The papers made soft sounds against the wood. $50,000 fit in this envelope, Danielle said. No one moved. So did all the reasons families in my building were told they might have to leave. She pushed the envelope toward the center of the table. I am not asking you to erase every bill. I am not asking you to make rent free. I am asking you to look at what happens when a late payment becomes another fee, then another, while repairs wait because somebody decided the numbers looked better that way. Evan shifted forward. Miss Carter, the redevelopment agreement would bring significant investment into the property. Danielle looked at him. I believe you. Her answer seemed to surprise him. I also believe buildings cost money to run. But if the plan only works when the people already living there cannot afford to stay, then somebody should have to say that out loud before calling it improvement. Marcus lowered his eyes for a moment. He remembered approving the targets without asking that question. The board chair turned toward him. Marcus, the agreement closes Friday. Walking away now triggers the termination payment, delays the refinancing package, and raises serious questions about management oversight. I know. And your compensation committee will review the performance award tied to this transaction. I know that too. Danielle glanced at him. Marcus did not look heroic. He looked tired. For reasons she could not explain, that mattered more. He was not being asked to give away something effortless. The board chair folded her hands. Then what are you recommending? Marcus looked first at Evan. You followed the targets I approved. Evan's expression tightened. Marcus, I am not putting this on you. Then Marcus looked around the table. I signed the policy. I rewarded the results. I stopped asking what those results required from the people living inside them. He placed his copy of the redevelopment agreement beside Danielle's envelope. I am recommending we withdraw. The finance director exhaled sharply. Another board member leaned back. That will cost the company millions. Yes. And you are prepared to accept responsibility for that decision? Marcus answered without hesitation. Yes. The discussion that followed lasted nearly an hour. Danielle listened as people argued about debt, projections, contractual penalties, and investor confidence. For once, she heard the machinery behind the letters that had appeared under her door. It was not one cruel person deciding who deserved a home. It was a room full of reasonable people making reasonable decisions until the human cost disappeared between percentages. When the vote finally came, the redevelopment agreement was suspended and the fee policy sent for portfolio-wide review. It was not everything. It was enough to change what happened next. As chairs moved and folders closed, the communications director approached Danielle. We would like to talk about sharing your story when the review is announced. What you did with the money, your housing situation, Mr. Bennett's response. It could show people the company is listening. Danielle looked at Marcus. He said nothing. He had learned enough to let the answer be hers. Danielle zipped the gray envelope closed. No. The woman blinked. We would compensate you. No. Danielle stood and tucked the envelope beneath her arm. Fix it because it was wrong. Not because I am useful. Marcus met her eyes. Understood. There was no applause. No sudden celebration. Danielle preferred it that way. In the elevator, Marcus joined her only after asking if she minded. As the doors closed, Danielle looked at his reflection in the brushed metal. You lost a lot today. I did. Do you regret it? Marcus was quiet until the elevator passed the 30th floor. Ask me when I have had to live with it for a while. Danielle almost smiled. It was the first answer he had given her that did not try to sound certain. When the elevator reached the lobby, she stepped into the afternoon light carrying the same envelope that had once held enough money to rescue her alone. This time, what she carried inside it had forced a room full of powerful people to see everyone else. 6 months later, the blue thread was still holding. Danielle noticed it one Saturday morning as she stood behind the counter of Carter Repairs and Alterations, turning the old gray canvas envelope over in her hands while sunlight warmed the front window. The shop was not large. It occupied a narrow space beside a laundromat 3 blocks from Maya's school, with 2 sewing machines, 1 fitting mirror, a rack of finished clothes, and a second-hand wooden counter that still carried a faint scratch near the register. Danielle loved every inch of it. She still worked 3 mornings a week at the hospital cafeteria because the shop was not earning enough yet to carry everything alone. She still checked her bank balance before buying groceries. Some months were better than others. But the rent on their apartment was current, the stairwell stayed dry, and maintenance requests no longer disappeared into silence. The company review had removed several fees, created realistic payment plans, and required property managers to meet with residents before certain housing actions moved forward. It had not transformed every building overnight. Danielle trusted that more than a miracle. Real repair took time. Mom, this button looks weird. Maya sat at the small table near the window, attempting to sew a yellow button onto a piece of scrap fabric. Danielle walked over and examined it. That is because you have sewn it to the tablecloth. Maya froze. Danielle tried not to laugh. Do not move. Am I fired? You do not work here. Then I cannot be fired. Exactly. Danielle carefully freed the thread while Maya grinned. The bell above the front door chimed. Marcus Bennett stepped inside carrying a charcoal overcoat over one arm. He looked different without a conference room around him. Still polished, still unmistakably a man accustomed to being listened to, but quieter somehow. The months since the board meeting had cost him more than the newspapers ever learned. His performance bonus was gone. The redevelopment penalty had been substantial. 2 board members had challenged his leadership, and Marcus had spent weeks answering questions about policies he once approved in minutes. He had not complained to Danielle about any of it. That mattered too. I have a problem, he said. Danielle raised an eyebrow. That sounds expensive. Marcus held up the overcoat. A seam beneath one sleeve had opened. I was told you repair things. Depends. Some things are beyond saving. The coat or me? Maya looked up. Danielle gave Marcus a measured glance. I was talking about the coat. He smiled and placed it on the counter. No rush. Danielle examined the seam. Thursday. Thursday is fine. 6 months earlier, he might have offered extra money to move ahead in the queue. Now he simply nodded and took the chair near the window when Maya told him she needed an opinion on something important. She pulled the gray canvas envelope from beneath a stack of colored pencils. Danielle had stopped using it for bills after the housing review ended. Maya had claimed it almost immediately. Look. She unzipped it and removed a drawing. A small brick building filled most of the page, with a bright yellow window and a sign over the door that read Carter Repairs. 2 figures stood beneath the awning, one tall and one small, their hands colored brown. Near the edge of the picture was another figure holding a dark coat. Marcus studied it. Is that me? Yes. Why am I standing all the way over there? Maya shrugged. Because you just got here. Danielle looked down to hide a smile. Marcus seemed to consider the answer seriously. Fair. Maya returned to her buttons, leaving the drawing on the counter. Danielle folded Marcus's coat over her arm. Their relationship had grown slowly in the months after the meeting, mostly through conversations that had nothing to do with money. Coffee after resident meetings. A school fundraiser where Marcus bought exactly 1 raffle ticket after Danielle warned him not to buy the entire roll. Saturday mornings when he occasionally stopped by the shop and waited his turn like everyone else. Whatever might come later, neither of them was rushing to name it. Gratitude was not love, and rescue was not intimacy. Trust had to become something on its own. Outside, a city bus passed through the intersection, tires whispering over pavement still damp from morning rain. Danielle glanced at the gray envelope beside Maya's drawing. Once, it had carried $50,000. Then it had carried overdue bills and the possibility of losing their home. Now it held drawings, spelling tests, a photograph from Maya's birthday, and $3 she had saved for pancakes. Danielle touched the repaired corner where the blue thread remained visible. She could have replaced it with something newer months ago. She never did. Some repairs were not meant to hide where something had come apart. They were meant to prove it could hold again. Marcus rose from the chair and looked toward the drawing one more time. Thursday, he asked. Danielle placed his coat behind the counter with the others. Thursday. And you wait like everybody else. I am learning. Slowly. Maya laughed. Marcus did too. Sunlight moved across the shop floor, catching the blue thread along the envelope's edge. Danielle returned to her sewing machine. Maya bent over another button, and Marcus sat back down instead of leaving. No one in the room needed saving. For now, being there was enough. Thank you so much for watching. If Danielle and Maya's story touched your heart, please share it with someone who might need this reminder today. Doing the right thing may not always make life easier, but one honest choice can inspire change far beyond what we can see. I'd also love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and tell me which moment stayed with you the most. Danielle returning the bag filled with $50,000, her decision to refuse an easy way out when other families were still struggling, or Marcus choosing to take responsibility for the policies he once approved. And perhaps the most meaningful reminder of all is that old gray envelope, still held together by blue thread. It once carried $50,000. Then it carried overdue bills and the fear of losing a home. In the end, it carried drawings, memories, and hope, a reminder that some things don't need to be perfect to become whole again. If you enjoy heartfelt stories about ordinary people, difficult choices, and the kindness that can change lives, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our next story. Until next time, take care of yourself. Keep choosing kindness even when no one is watching, and God bless you.